Welcome. I am your host, Cindy Watson, and today I cannot wait to introduce you to Chris Mullins. This is going to be a really interesting topic. Today, we're going to be talking about how a lawyer can utilize phone calls and learn to convert every call into a viable prospective client. That is not a skill set that I have or a tactic that I've used, so I am also looking forward to this interview. So welcome, Chris. It is great to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Cindy.
And for those of you who don't know Chris, you are in for a treat. Chris started her first job in phone sales at only 19 years old, and desperate to keep that position, she learned everything she could about connecting with prospects and moving them to a commitment, which is quite a specific skill set, I do know. By the age 20, she was already her employer's #1 salesperson, and since then, she's now nationally recognized author and speaker on law firm lead conversion, which we could all probably use a little of. She's also the founder and CEO of Intake Academy, helped more than 200 consumer law firms tap the immense power of that higher lead conversion. So, Chris, tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, and where you got started.
Yeah, well, I think you just got a little background about my sales. It was actually in the newspaper business I was in.
Ah,
Yeah, newspaper business, but I was receptionist, inside sales, outside sales, selling subscriptions, advertising, knocking on doors, selling windows on Sundays in the freezing cold, you name it. So that's my sales background. And I got into the legal business by just speaking on stage. I think Dan Kennedy, he does a lot of marketing events. And I was speaking on stage. There were a lot of lawyers in the audience, lawyers that spend money on marketing.
yeah.
So that's like a key area for my clients. They spend money on marketing, and but they do little to nothing to improve conversion.
Yeah.
And so when they hear me speak about conversion, they're interested. And so that's kind of how I got in the legal business. And it's been 25 years now. I've been working with law firms specifically. That's it.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I'm hoping that's better than the newspaper industry, which I know is a tough gig. So, has that been your experience, or are we a tough
I love
crowd?
the law. I love law firms. I love everything about it. It's so interesting on everything that you know. Like, I know a lot about sales and relationships and
Yeah.
conversion and experiences, but you can teach it to really any business because
Yeah.
it really applies to all businesses. And so law firms, some people are uncomfortable communicating with law firms. I'm not. I work with the CEOs and all different levels.
Yeah. So how did you develop the niche in helping law firms? Was it just luck of the draw that you happened to be at that conference, or was there something
Yeah.
about it that drew you to it?
Yeah, no, it was just there were lawyers in the audience. I used to work a lot with the medical field, dentists that were spending money on marketing, but lawyers were there and they were interested and they didn't have any other folks that focused on intake. And that's it. But then you have to do your work. You don't burn your bridges, you network, you attract yourself to the people that want to manifest the most in the legal world, and you chase them and go right to them. And so it just worked, and I kept speaking, and yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Now,
Yeah.
I've got to think, knowing, I mean, I know a bit about the newspaper industry. I've sort of represented some people within the industry, and I know it can be a really tough, challenging industry. So, at what point for you did it start becoming a passion?
I would say the day my boss, Phil Pelletier, I thought I was really big stuff. Like I knew everything. I was just the cat's meow on that phone there, handling these calls with prospects calling in to place ads and yard sales. And I thought I was really good because I spent a lot of time on the phone talking to these
I
people,
bet.
having a good old time. And then Phil came over and he called me into his office and he let me know that I really wasn't doing a good job.
Oh,
I thought I was just amazing. And he let me know that no, you're not supposed to spend that long on the phone. And you're doing a disservice if you do that. And you need to convert more. And you're missing calls. And
okay.
so when I accepted what he said and did it differently. I mean, at first it was a little hard to hear that, but once I listened to what he said and changed it, then I was really very good. And then I started speaking at newspaper conferences on advertising, representing the newspaper I worked at. And then other newspapers started calling me to try to get me to leave where I was to go to their paper. And then I started writing, and then I said, I'm going to start my own business.
Nice.
So I just stopped cold turkey after maybe like 10 years and
Yeah.
started my own consulting business.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I love that you're coming from that growth mindset as well, right? Like you say, it's not always easy to hear, but when we are open to getting that constructive feedback to become the best possible version of ourselves, that's when we can really show up with a little more purpose and passion, I find. Has that been your experience, Chris?
I think so, but I think that's definitely important. But I think the other part of the formula that's important is that when you're working with somebody, um, they're good people.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they take care of you, you know, like and trust them. They know, like and trust you. And that's the formula. So you can't really do it on your own.
Yeah, beautiful. So why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers out there, what is it that you do to help lawyers and law firms? I'd love to hear about
Well,
this.
it's basically, I started my business with law firms by doing mystery calls. So I, by myself, back in the day when we had cassette recorders, I
Wow, now you're really dating yourself.
I used to make phone calls to law firms and play prospective client and record the calls with their permission.
Yeah.
And I had these boxes on my floor in my office full of white cassettes that a minister gave me for free because he had leftover from a sermon.
Yeah.
And I hand wrote on all of the cassettes the name of the firms, and I mailed packages to the law firms of their cassettes. And I transcribed myself every single recording and put stacks of paper in the mail.
Wow.
That's how I began. But the moral of the story is now what I do is, and my team is, we listen to real call recordings, prospect call recordings from the law firms. Some of them still need mystery calls done, but most have their own recordings now. And we just listen to them with their permission and review them, what worked, you know, what didn't work, and the opportunities, and then how can we provide advice to fix it. So if a law firm said to me right now, if a partner said to me, hey, Chris, what's the single most important thing I have to do in my firm to improve conversion? I would tell them this the one thing that you can do is what I call RMFD, and it stands for record, monitor, feedback daily. And you simply listen to your call recordings. If you listen to them and you give feedback to your team, if you just did that one thing, you would see a remarkable difference in your conversion.
Okay. Well, explain, I'd love you to go a little deeper on that for a minute. When you say mystery call, I know that's something you're super familiar with, but some of our listeners may
Yeah.
not be. So what do you mean by that?
Some people call it mystery calls, some call it ghost calls. And what it is it's kind of the same idea. Around the holiday times, they have mystery shoppers that go into retail stores
Got it.
and they check on customer service. They pretend to be a customer to see how customer service is. So it's the same idea. You just pick up the phone and you play prospective client and you call a law firm and you record it. And then you're giving a demonstration as to, well, how would it be if it was a real prospect? And so that's really what a mystery call or a ghost call is, either or. It's better to listen to your real calls.
Yeah.
But if you can't get them recorded, then just put this in place. And it's really easy.
And with your RMFD process, what is it that you're looking for? Can you give us, again, just dig a little deeper for us on that?
Yeah, what I'm looking for is relationship building. And you could tell that by engaging with the prospect on the phone. I'm looking for assumptive language. So not being afraid of assuming the sale, because at the end of the day, the prospective client called the law firm because they're ready.
Yeah.
It's not because they're not ready. They call because they're ready. And typically, you know, most people that are calling a law firm, they're not calling the same day that they had their accident. Some people do, they're calling on the scene, but most people it's been weeks, months, maybe even years. And then they finally make that call. So that means they're hyper responsive and they're ready, ready, ready. So we don't want the intake specialist to be laid back and kind of like, if you want, I can send you a DocuSign retainer right now. Or if you want, you could talk to an attorney. You don't want that. You want them to go right in, not be afraid of the S word sales, because it's not the bad S word sales, it's a good S word. And just go in there and just say, Mrs. Smith, based on everything that you said, here's how we're going to help you. I'm going to send you right now a DocuSign. I'm going to walk you through it. I won't leave you. I'll stay with you the entire way. It'll be just like I'm holding your hand. You'll be able to click and do a signature. Well, I never did a signature before. Well, I'm going to show you how to do it for the very first time, and you're going to feel like $1 million. And you get to you. And so that's what you're going to do. That's what you're going to do.
I like it. So when you say assumptive language, and I just want to put a pin in this because I think that's a really important distinction that we often forget. I take it you're talking about assume that this is already a done deal. Assume, of course, you're going to be having a relationship as opposed
Right.
to giving the option. Would you like? Are you interested? Just change up your language so you're framing it as if you're already assuming you guys have this relationship and that's a no-brainer.
You're absolutely right, Cindy. That's it. That's all it just assume the sale and don't be afraid of it. Don't think that you're a stereotypical car salesman kind of, because that's not what you are.
Yeah.
That's not what you are, but you're helping this person. If you're laid back, they're going to be laid back.
Yeah.
If you say if you want to, they're going to say, well, I don't know, maybe I'll call around. You
Yeah.
don't want that to happen because
Yeah.
it might have cost you $500 in marketing dollars to get that lead to first
Yeah.
base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you talk about relationship, what are some of the things that you're looking for? What would be your top tips about how to build relationship?
The most, so there's two things, like one is empathy. And empathy is probably the most challenging
Yeah.
thing that I have to get students to embrace and execute.
Yeah.
A lot of people are really, I mean, just even in their personal lives, I happen to feel like what you are in your personal life is typically what you are in your professional life.
Yeah.
You bring it all, it just kind of chases you.
Yeah.
And so if you're not really comfortable with empathy and compassion, it doesn't mean that you don't have it in your heart. It just means you're not comfortable with crossing that line of using words of empathy
Yeah.
to somebody. If you're wondering if it's too personal or too intimate and should you go there? And so you probably don't do it at work when it's necessary. And when you're in this career, it is necessary to be empathetic when somebody tells you that they were hit by an 18-wheeler, or they're getting a divorce, or
Mhm.
there's a DUI. I mean, there's no reason not to provide empathy.
Yes.
So it's teaching empathy, getting team members and students, whether it's an attorney or the negotiations team or intake, to embrace it and then execute it is the most important and the biggest challenge. The other is a single question that I teach everyone to ask, and then have that question follow the prospect as they become a client all the way throughout the relationship. And the question is this: what is it that got you to decide to give us a call today about your accident?
Mm.
Do it the way I just did it. So the exact way I did it, the pace
Yeah.
I did it, I emphasized the word today.
Yeah.
I had a question mark and I paused. And what you're doing is you're trying to identify the prospect's emotional pain and decision-making process that made them, the triggers that made them say, do it now, call them now.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then you take that information, you use it in intake to build a relationship. And they're like, wow, you really heard me. You got me. You understand me. And now they're knowing, liking, and trusting you.
Yeah.
And then when they become a client, or even before that, if you have intake, do the initial intake, and then maybe at your firm, every firm is different. Maybe your firm, you have them talk to an attorney for the attorney to convert. Well, the attorney needs to know that answer to that question so
Yeah.
they can use it in the conversation. But then when they become a client, you need that answer to that question to follow them as a client
Yeah.
all the way throughout the relationship of that client. So you can continually remind them, this is why I need you to go to the doctors. This is why I need you to do what I'm asking you to do. This is why I'm asking you to take this offer. You've got to remind them about their real raw pain the day they called.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And it's interesting to me because I have created a program called The Art of Feminine Negotiation, which I mean, sales is
Nice.
certainly a form of negotiation.
Yes.
And one of the models is I call it the R-FIT model. And it's about the REFIT of that is about building rapport and bringing empathy to the table. And I think a lot of people misunderstand empathy. It's about being able to put yourself in the shoes of the other party, trying genuinely to understand what their needs are to be able to meet those needs. And we don't listen so well in North America. I'm not. So, what role does listening play in your process? I'd be interested, Chris.
Yeah, it plays a really big role. And, you know, whenever you ask a question like the emotional pain question, you don't just ask it and get the answer.
Yeah.
You want to repeat it back to
Yes.
them, but you have to repeat it back with concern and a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
So you're listening to the answer and you're repeating it back so they know that you got it and you listen to it. And now you're repeating it back with urgency and concern. And so they're hearing your voice change. And so now they're going to be embracing, well, wow, I wasn't sure if I should call. I don't like law firms. I don't trust them.
Yeah.
I called a few others, but this person I'm talking to makes it sound like it's a really big deal. What I just said, I guess I better go forward with this.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're really laid back and you don't repeat back what they say and you're not listening to them and you're not saying, I just heard you when you said, and then repeat what they say, when you're not doing that, they're not really feeling like this is a big deal. And they're just going to say, check, I got this done today. And they're going to feel like, I feel good, I got it done, but they won't go
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
And that's it. So you have to listen, repeat back, and then show them your concern and your urgency in their life right now.
Yeah. Okay. And so what is the rest of this RMFD process? So we've got that relationship piece as part of it, the empathy piece as part of it.
Yep. It's record, monitor, feedback daily. So the key thing is get your calls recorded. If you're doing marketing and you're spending a lot of money on marketing, the likelihood that you can get your calls recorded pretty easily with a couple of phone calls is really, really good.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that if they have marketing agencies working for them, Google, the different campaigns they have, they already are recording your calls and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
And some have the ability, but they haven't flipped the switch. So check the laws for recording calls in your state.
Yeah.
But go ahead and execute it. So get them recorded, or if you can't, do those calls with the mystery calls, and then monitor them by listening, and then give feedback, ideally on a daily basis, to your team about how the call went. Tell them the great things, because it's important for them to know the great things, because everybody does something great.
Yeah.
Maybe it's one, they just do, but we're mostly in the habit of recognizing what we don't do well versus what we do well.
That's true.
So it's up to the leaders to say, no, this was great. Maybe it was just a tone of voice, but that's okay. And then tell them the opportunities, but then you can't just walk away. You got to solve it for them. You got to tell them. You don't let them figure it out. Tell them exactly how to fix it. Demonstrate it for them over and over again, and they'll get it.
Yeah.
Don't beat them up. I talk to a lot of firms where, there are definitely some that when I actually have an evaluation consultation with them and I play some of their call recordings that they sent me to inspect, I've had some, like, you can hear them throwing things in the conference room, losing it, really, really angry and upset, and, hang up on me and then call me back and apologize. I mean, they're just not because of me, because they had no idea.
Yeah.
And so the thing I want to say about that is, this is not about catching your team doing something wrong.
Yes.
That's not what this is about. RMFD. That's not what it's about. It's about catching them doing something right.
Yeah.
And in that process, at the same time, you can enhance your conversion just by looking, maybe by 20%. But you don't want to beat your team up. That's not what this is about.
Well, and I think that's a really important distinction, especially in the practice of law, where, let's face it, a lot of lawyers are that A-type personality, and we are harder on ourselves than just about anybody else. We expect that perfection. We hate that, we've got that profound fear of failure often until we do the inner work to get around that. So creating a culture where there's psychological safety to be trying and growing, I think, is really important.
Yeah, it's critically important. And then the other area is that I focus on is even the mental health of your team and self-care, because I liken the intake specialists and sometimes the attorneys, because some attorneys are doing intake. I liken those roles to, and even negotiations and client care, paralegal, to like a 911 call center.
Yeah.
So people taking those calls, they don't know what's going to happen from 1 minute to the next, or what kind of call they're going to get. And the trauma that they feel and everybody in the law firm feels is great. But there's not a lot of looking at the trauma that the team members are feeling from all of these calls: veterans calls, Social Security disability calls, people saying over the line that they're suicidal, people with terrible, horrific accidents. It's really, really bad. So the other thing that's incredibly important is to take care of your team, and help put a system in place of self-care to help them take care of themselves. You take care of them, so that they can at least release all these terrible traumatic stresses, and then you can retain them longer, being a valued team member of your firm.
Well, and I want to drill in on that because I think you've just hit on something really important there, Chris. Because as lawyers, I think we often underestimate the extent to which we absorb some of this. I mean, clients tend to come to us when there are problems often. I mean, other than practices where everything is proactive, but I think for much of the practice of law, we're dealing with problems, we're absorbing other people's problems, we're getting all of that energy. So, what are some of the tips you have for firms to be able to ensure that well-being so that we can continue to find a better way to practice and show up to with passion and purpose every day?
Yeah, I think, you don't have to dive in and try to conquer everything all at once. You just need to begin. And I think the beginning steps can be, like venting sessions. So we've organized some venting sessions for firms like around COVID.
Mm,
And team members actually just, showed up via Zoom, and all they did is talked about their story from the day it
yeah.
started till the current date. And some of the things they said were really terrible, but they got to say it, and it really affected them at work too, because they're at the office or they're at home. They're at the office or they're at home. It's back and forth, back and forth. So you can do the same thing for the trauma and the horrific calls that everybody are taking every day, all day long, back to back. Just have venting sessions. Let people show up and vent with no strings attached. There's no repercussions, simply about their story of their experiences that day. You
Yeah.
do not have to solve it. That's the key. Do not try to solve it. Just let them speak, hear them, and that's it. And then by everybody doing it together, however you need to organize it, everybody's learning from each other that, hey, I'm not alone. I knew I wasn't alone, but now I know I'm not alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then everybody should also provide, what do they do to try to take care of themselves? And then they're learning that. And then the leader of the group can share ideas on other things that you can do. Maybe the leader does, but they're not trying to solve it. They're just giving different examples and ideas. So if you do that on a regular basis, that would be huge. And the other thing that you can do that's also very easy is you could create like safe words. So
Mhm.
maybe like a word is apple, and everybody's using Zoom, and even if they're not, they get to send the word apple to a leader when they're really having a meltdown,
Yeah.
like they can't take it anymore, the calls that they've been taking or a call that they were just on. So whomever is responsible for receiving safe words that day, they can immediately go to that person. However they need to get to them, they immediately go to them, and they have them shut their phone off, and they talk to them, and they let them vent and let them get it out. And
Hmm.
so there's a lot of different things that you can do. And I actually talked a lot to law firms about creating quiet rooms. So you could just have a team member, there's a room, there's a special place or an area where they can go, or maybe it's a break that they take because they're at home and they say they're in the quiet room, and they can go and they can just be quiet. There's no electronics. They can just go there and kind of decompress from whatever the situation is. But if you
Hmm.
just did that at a minimum, that would be huge. It would
Well,
just show you how much you care about them.
yeah, and I think it's raising that awareness and having that comfort that this is a place where there's psychological safety and we've got systems in place to help facilitate that. And part of it I find can be really helpful. I'd be interested in your perspective on this. Is being able to shift perspective and being really careful of the language that we use, because when it is important to be able to vent and have those safe spaces to go, and with that to have people coming in and talking about how you can shift your perspective, because when we keep talking about trauma and crisis, those words trigger that angst. So being able to
Yep.
recognize that passion and the fact that we are making a difference in the world and focusing on that as well, I have found can be a really powerful shift. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think the most important thing, regardless if somebody needs a venting moment or not, is to remind the team every day, you're not really in the legal business as much as you're in the relationship and healing
Yeah.
business. That's the
Yeah.
real business you're in. And you're providing hope every day,
Yeah.
one call at a time, to every single person. Write down the names of the different clients that you spoke to or prospects in a day, put them in a journal, look at the end of every day, put your head on your pillow and remember some of those names and the stories and how wonderful it was that they felt safe talking to you, not the law firm, it was you.
And hope and healing, such powerful words you've just given us there, Chris. I think that's a
Yeah, hope
beautiful
and healing.
reframe, such a beautiful reframe. And it's interesting today because I mean, your focus is on these phone calls, these all important phone calls. And so many people think the phone is sort of the way of the dodo bird. So I'd love your perspective on how this sort of old tool, if you will, is maybe a secret weapon as a sales tool. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a secret weapon. And you know what happened? However many hundred of years ago, they had secretaries and receptionists, and they were just doing everything, everything. They had every single job at
Yeah.
whatever the business was, but nobody really respected their roles.
Yeah.
So it was always a receptionist or a secretary that fell into the phone role, and nobody really recognized the importance of the role, let alone the phone.
Yeah.
And so what's a little bit more exciting is outside sales, nose to nose and toe to toe. That's really glamorous and exciting. And everybody cares about
Yeah.
that. And everybody does it, right? And so you get paid more money, and it's really the most talked about department at every business. But the phone, it's really been, so it's not like this anymore, but it used to be thought of as the stepdaughter or the gals in the back of the room, not really serious business tool, efficient, that you already have in your office. It's looked at as a piece of office equipment.
Yeah.
But I have to say, still today, I still find that to be a challenge. Is law firms that spend money on marketing are very concerned about conversion, but still getting them to cross that line of being just as concerned about the individuals that are the heroes, the unsung heroes that are taking care of your firm, that if you didn't have them, you wouldn't have a firm. That's still a big challenge today.
Yeah. Another H word. I'm loving this. Hope, healing, heroes. It's a great reminder, a great way
Heroes.
to synthesize that. That's beautiful. And
They are the knights in shining armor.
yes. So what are some of the steps, as a practical matter? Like what are, I guess, two elements that I'm really interested in hearing about as well, and I'm sure our listeners are too. So how do you get those all important calls in? How do you get those leads? And then what are some of the steps that you teach to turn those phone calls into prospects?
Yeah, getting the leads, you basically have to agree that you need to do marketing, and you just need to do it. You just got to cross that line and do marketing. They're not just going to come to you, and find the right legal marketing agency. There's a lot of them out there. Do your due diligence, check references. Don't just hire them and spend all kinds of money. Check references, make sure they're going to take care of you and service you, and they get results, and then decide how much money you're going to allocate to it.
Yeah.
And then as far as the conversion part of it, it can be as easy as just asking.
Yeah.
We forget to ask.
Yeah, that's so
We
true.
we tend to spend more time talking people out of it than into it.
Yeah.
So all we have to do is follow your screening question process, do it with love, care, and concern, and provide empathy, hear what somebody's saying, repeat it back to them, control the conversation, make sure you're focused on the desired outcome, which is converting, and giving hope at the same time, at the middle of the call, the end of the call, making sure that the experience, whether you can help them or not, is Ritz-Carlton and Four Seasons. It's not a law firm. You don't look at it like a law firm. You don't sound like a law firm. You want to sound like the Ritz-Carlton and the Four Seasons, giving an experience, because they're going to call 3 to 4 or 5 of your competitors.
Yeah.
After they're done talking to you, they're still going to do their due diligence. And when they call them, all you want to have happen simply is you want them to go, wow, I'm sticking with Mary because she was amazing. These other, they didn't even sound like they cared about me. And so it comes down to using a script, and I use the other S word, script, but I don't use script in a way of old school where it is like sound like you're scripted.
Yeah.
A script is just a blueprint and a tool and a checklist. That's all it is. I mean, many top professionals script out their day on time blocks. So it's no different. And I don't want you to sound scripted, but you do need to have a script that you can follow that keeps you focused on the desired outcome, which is conversion. Otherwise, you're going to forget about the conversion. You're just going to ask questions and fill in the blanks. and
Yeah.
you don't want that.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. I really like that idea about experience as well, that I think it sets us apart. As lawyers, we get so focused sometimes on the law and on process that we forget to bring humanity to the table so that
Yeah,
people can have that better experience. And I think that is something that can really set us apart when we get intentional about that. So,
yeah, and you just said another H word that we say a lot is humanize the conversation.
yeah. Yeah.
Humanize that conversation. Don't sound like license and registration, question, 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 question.
Yeah.
Humanize it, build a relationship.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what's your experience about how that helps, like this process? I mean, other than obviously the ability to bring more clients, but as you know, I mean, our podcast is all about practicing with purpose and how to bring sort of that more heart and be able to rekindle your passion and purpose for the practice of law. And I'm curious because it strikes me that this process is something that would actually allow us to have more control over the kind of clients that we bring in, for example, where it is more experiential. So it ends up making a more purpose driven approach to the law. What has been your experience being sort of one of the number one leads on this particular process, Chris?
Well, I think the most important thing with purpose is for lawyers, partners to kind of go back to the beginning and ask themselves, why did I become a lawyer?
Yes.
And try with all your might to remember your story. Whatever that story was, what was the story? And write about it and journal about it and just get yourself really refocused on it. And if you can do that, then the next is just to remember that the purpose of every single phone call, every prospect and client communication moment is hope.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's all it is. It's just hope.
Yeah.
Your hope because your conversion, or maybe you couldn't help somebody, but you still give them hope. You tell them, don't give up. We're
Yeah.
not able to help you with this case, but don't give up. Here's some phone
Yeah.
numbers for you to call. Go ahead, get your family, get them to help you, make those phone calls. I'm going to be thinking about you. I wish we could help you, but we can't. And so
Mm-hmm.
you give that person hope. You feel like $1 million. The partners, the firm feels like $1 million. You get Google reviews that say, ABC law firm couldn't help me,
Yeah.
but they gave me an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And it was Mary that helped me. That's what you want,
Yeah.
because that goes
Yeah.
back to the day that you said, I'm going to be a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful advice. And speaking of that experience, and not to put you on the spot, hopefully this is comfortable to you. So, using myself for example, we're a labor and employment firm. So, the labor piece of it is dealing with trade unions. So, that's a little different because it's such a niche market. But let's take some employment examples. Either somebody's, they've just lost their job, they've been terminated, or it's been a workers' comp situation where they've had an accident. What are can you give us just a little flavor for some of the elements of how that conversation would go? What you would invite as sort of the steps to take in that conversation to create that sort of experience, Chris?
Yeah, I think that again, asking about the emotional pain. What is it that got you to give us a call today
Yeah.
about losing your job? And then question mark, pause. Pause is so powerful in every communication.
Yes.
It is a tool for the personal world as well as the professional world. Even students can use pause, but pause and listen to what they say and then repeat it with concern and urgency, and then weave that answer throughout the conversation with them to keep reminding them, this is terrible and I wouldn't want to be in your shoes, and I hear you and I feel what you're saying. And then kind of like you're looking them in the eyes and your hands are on their shoulders and you're sitting in your living room and you're not shaking them, but you're saying to them, I can help you and you called the right place and here's how I can help you. The next step is for me to ask you some questions that might be really difficult, but I do need to ask them. And then when that person is really venting about how they were done wrong with either situation, employment or workman's comp,
Yeah.
you don't want to judge them. You just want to hear them. I think sometimes what happens is when we take so many phone calls, regardless of the market, is we feel like we start judging people, like we don't believe them.
Mm-hmm.
We don't believe that you really are in trouble, that you really need this, you really deserve it. You brought it on yourself. And that's what happens when you're taking too many calls and you're not getting to vent. So
Yeah.
you've got to just remind yourself to be there for that person, repeat what they say, tell them that they're at the right place. ABC Law Firm is the right law firm for you. You made the right decision giving us a call today. We can help you. We get calls like this all the time.
Yeah.
And so my next question is, and then keep controlling the call and redirecting the call. But don't forget to put a warm blanket over them
Yeah.
throughout the entire process. Just
Yeah.
like when you go and have day surgery and they give you these, they take these blankets, I think they put them in microwave ovens and
Yes.
they put it on top of you. That's what I want you to do. That's what I
Yeah.
want you to do when someone loses their job or they have workman's comp situation.
Yeah.
I want you to dig down deep and look at them in a way that you see the movie of what they're talking to you about. You visualizing their terrible story so that you can really relate to them.
Yeah. And you know you've succeeded when your prospective client comes away feeling like they've been to the spa.
I love that one. That's really great. I hear you. Yeah.
That's so good. And I assume obviously part of what you're saying there, Chris, sounds to me like it's about be fully present and then build that rapport, build that trust, bring that empathy to the table and get curious where you're, allowing that space for them to feel heard and valued and seen. Is that sort of a fair?
Exactly. But what you also have to do is you have to be that expert
Mhm.
that doesn't get lost in the conversation, so much so that you forget to ask your screening questions. So every
Yeah,
law firm has their own intake screening question
sure.
process. And we got to make sure that you get those questions answered so that you know if you can even help this person. And sometimes we get off track and
Yeah,
we get so involved in the conversation, we forget to get to all those questions.
yeah.
So you still have to stay in control. It's like you have a rope around them and you're pulling them through and you're guiding them and you're getting them to the safe place. And the safe place is the next very important question that you have to ask.
Nice image. I like that. And are you actually giving advice on these calls, or is this bringing them in so that then they can retain? You have that consultation, laying out the options, or what is the end goal of the particular call? I mean, obviously,
Absolutely, on every intake call, regardless of the market area, employment, workman's comp, personal injury,
yeah,
social security, veterans, it doesn't matter. You don't ever give advice,
okay,
because your role in the intake process is simply to move them to the conversion step.
yeah,
And you don't need to give advice, legal advice, to do that. It has nothing to do with it. You just follow the process of the screening questions that were designed for you to ask in order to determine, do we go here that we can help them or do we go here that we can't help them? And so when they ask you questions about legal, which they will,
yeah,
just accept the fact that they're going to and embrace it and just let them know that's a really great question. Write it down. And when you speak to the attorney,
yeah,
ask that question. And in fact, when we hang up, you're going to have a bunch of other questions. Write them all down and ask the attorney. So redirect it with truth.
yeah,
And don't feel like you're put on the spot and you have to answer the questions, because that's not you don't need to do that. You could talk yourself out of getting a client to the next step if
yeah,
you did that. And you can do a disservice
yeah,
because the only one knows is the lawyer.
yeah. So I take it your advice, and I'm glad I asked the question because that's a really important distinction. So
Mhm.
under your system, it's not the lawyer's idea. I mean, you said it can be, but ideally, it's not the lawyer who's taking these. You've got either a person or persons, a team, who are handling these intake to help funnel those prospective clients through to make sure you're getting the right clients that are the kind of clients that you love to work with, that you can actually make a meaningful difference with, and then get them funneled through to the next stage. Is that a fair characterization?
Exactly right. But just to kind of throw a little curveball into it is, so if you're a law firm that have attorneys that are also doing intake, okay, so they're the attorney, and you might be thinking, well, then Chris, that's okay if we give legal advice. Well, no, it's not,
Yeah.
because you're not at that place yet.
Yeah.
You're in the sales mode.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're negotiating a relationship here, and the attorney has to zip it up, put their hand over their mouth. Less is more, less is more, less is more. Do not say a word.
Yeah.
Just do the intake. And when it's time to do the rest, you'll do the rest.
Yeah. Well, thanks for putting a pin in that, because I think that is a really important distinction for our listeners out there, that when you're in this mode, this is a different mode than when you're putting on that lawyer's hat and in that advice mode. I think that's such great advice. And I'd love to hear, how do you define success, Chris? And what's one thing you attribute your success to? I'd love you to share that with us.
I think for me, the biggest thing for me with success is I always claimed celebrity status. So it didn't matter where I was in my career. I acted as if I
Mm,
was already a celebrity. So I always said, I'm Chris Mullins, the phone sales doctor.
yeah.
When anybody ever spoke to me, it didn't matter where it was or how, and before you know it, everybody's like, oh, I mean, I just had a phone call the other day with a prospective client, and the partner said to me, I feel like I'm talking to a celebrity. And so,
Yeah.
but that's not, I mean, I'm a high school graduate,
Yeah.
and I just claimed it many, many years ago, and I maintained it in my writing, in my teaching, in my speaking
Yeah.
on stage. So I felt that way. And the more I felt that way and delivered it that way, everybody else felt that way. And that really was just having the courage to do that, and keep doing it. And then um, making sure I surrounded myself with people that were smarter than me,
Mm-hmm.
people that were already famous, that really were celebrities. I would just made sure that I called them. I reached out. I met them. I met them before conferences. They
Yeah.
didn't even know who I was, but I just said, I'm Chris Mullins, sales doctor. I'd like to meet you today.
Yeah.
And so I just made sure that I went to those people and then got relationships with them, gave something to them all the time,
Yeah.
and they always gave back. And we just kept in touch. And before you knew it, their tribe knew about Chris Mullins.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
So
you're
that
speaking
that's
into
my
something
biggest insight.
super important here, which is that mindset piece, right? I mean,
Yeah.
showing up as, you know, with absolute unshakable confidence in yourself. When you exude that kind of confidence, it other people will feel that energy. So I'd love your insights on, you know, how much of a role does mindset play when you're training a client on phone techniques?
100%. Yeah, absolutely 100%. At least it does for me.
Yeah.
So when I'm teaching, I am teaching students to focus on their mindset. I'm teaching them to remember the desired outcome. The desired outcome before conversion is hope.
Yeah.
Because if you give hope throughout the relationship on the call, you'll be able to convert. The conversion just kind of follows you. It's really effortless. It's just there because you're just building that relationship and providing hope. And then the other thing is that I focus a lot still in the mindset realm is be there, be now, be present.
Mm.
And I'm going to be 60 years old next month.
You look
And
great.
I am like still practicing being in the present moment.
Yes.
When I was running and I got my feet to focus on hitting that cement, there were moments that I thought I was flying because I was in the present moment, feeling my foot touch that ground.
Yeah.
But my point is that I'm still challenged with being present in the focused in that moment, be there, be now, and think about nothing else. That's the secret sauce of life.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
that is conquered, there's nothing else really.
Yeah. I so
But it
agree.
takes time and practice.
Yeah. And it's always that work in progress, right? I mean, being intentional about it because, and especially as lawyers, we're very challenged that way. We're always trying to do the multitask and having 100 things. And when you can just allow yourself to slow down, filter that out, and be fully present in whatever you're doing now,
Yeah,
you can show up as a better version of yourself. So I think that's
exactly.
such beautiful
But you have
advice.
to practice it at home too. So I'm the believer of you got to, everything that we talk about starts at home
Yeah.
and then it follows you to the office.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I do a lot of coaching for lawyers as well about how to shift to be able to have a better practice, better way, get away from that traditional kind of soul-sucking competitive mode into a way where you're practicing with heart and with purpose. And in with those clients in my masterminds, I mean, I take what I call the inside out approach. And it sounds like that's your approach as well, Chris, where you start on the inside with the mindset shifts that you need to be able to show up as the best version of yourself. How much of a role would you say that plays in the process you teach?
I think it plays a lot in the whole process. What you think of yourself and how you feel about yourself, but believing that you do have something to contribute just because you're here. You have something to
Yeah.
contribute.
Yeah.
And reminding yourself that there's a reason that you got this job. There's a reason you were attracted to it. There was a reason that you really agreed to it. It wasn't just a job. There was something that happened in that interview that made you say, this is for me, because I'm
Yeah.
going to be able to help people. And so
Yeah.
when the going gets tough and, those calls are back to back because they really are, and they're really challenging, you have to remember, just like the attorney, why did you take this job? Why are you taking these calls? Why have you decided to help people and provide hope?
Yeah, beautiful. And for our attorneys out there who are listening, I hope you're really absorbing this. Go back and re-listen to this episode so that when you're developing and training your team or getting some Chris to come in and help train your team, you can remember the importance of some of these principles and also decide what culture you want for your firm so that the people who you're training to take these intake calls can really embody that kind of passion and purpose that you want to represent your firm. So I love that. And Chris, you probably already spoke to this a little bit, but I'd be interested, what do you know now that you wish you'd known when you first started that would have helped you? You've already given us a bunch of gold nuggets on that, but I wonder if there's another aspect of that that you're like, gosh, do I wish I knew that when I'd started out?
I think probably staying in your lane,
Ah,
just stay in your lane. And so when I first started out, between newspapers and just any kind of like insurance companies, any businesses that found me on the internet, I was providing training for. And then I got into dental and I met some marketing dental people, some gurus. And so that kind of positioned to me to be the dentist phone sales doctor. But I was all over the place. And you can't really be efficient and scale when you're all over the place. So I think the biggest thing for me is stay in your lane.
mm-hmm.
And that means legal, law firms. Been doing it long enough, do very well at it. I enjoy it. I feel really good about it. When I put my head on the pillow at night, so stay
Yeah.
in your lane.
Yeah, beautiful. And I can't believe we're already coming to the end here. I normally end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've ever had in your life? Ironic because we've talked about mindset already, but not necessarily even in business, just generally, what would you say is one of your most profound mindset shifts, Chris?
I think that um, I it really only takes me to be able to execute excellence. So my mindset, my thought process, the people that I communicate with, the people I surround myself with, and to remember to not, like, just because it's been so many years, don't revert back to all the lessons that I learned and not do them anymore. Keep doing everything. I don't have to find something new or something
Mm-hmm.
else. I already know what works. So staying focused on what I know that works, not trying to reinvent the wheel, not trying to start over, and just believing that I am a celebrity.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And I want to really, again, just for our listeners out there, put a pin in that idea, the importance of that, the environment that we create. Because I think as
Yeah.
lawyers, we're so go, go, go sometimes. I think one of the real keys to being able to practice fully on purpose is being really mindful about the people that you surround yourself. Surround yourself with people who inspire you and people who make you laugh, people who are successful in
Right.
multiple ways. And
Mhm.
that can make such a profound shift in how we're able to show up as well. So,
Yeah, and let me just add too, don't be afraid. When there are people in your industry that are exceptional and you aspire to be like them, don't be afraid to call them.
yeah,
Don't be afraid to go to them. Just chase that fear, dive right into it, and don't worry about it. It'll
yeah,
work out. The only person that's wondering how it's going to go and afraid of it is you.
yeah,
The person you're going to, they think you're amazing that you called them,
yeah,
and they're honored.
yes.
So, but the last thing I want to say too is masterminds.
Mm,
Masterminds, back in the day, I invested $6,000 in a mastermind, and that was extremely expensive to me back then.
yeah,
I won't give you the details about how I even got there, but you know, masterminds, I have spent so much time on masterminds with all different kinds of professionals and gurus, and that is the biggest thing that helped me, besides my own mindset and attracting myself to like-minded people that were better than me,
yeah,
that's smarter. They already figured it out.
yeah,
And masterminds were just amazing. And the last mastermind was $40,000 that I invested in. So it
yeah,
was a big difference, but
yeah,
it's worth it. It's
yeah,
worth it because you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you have people that care for you and like you and trust you, and they will give you everything and you will give them everything. So masterminds, you know, back in the day, I didn't have masterminds. I figured it all out on my own, but then I really figured it out when I invested in masterminds.
yeah.
So
Totally
I
agree.
highly recommend masterminds.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's getting over that first hurdle to recognize. And and value yourself enough to invest in yourself. Because I host masterminds, I hold masterminds, and I also still pay and join masterminds, because it's that
Yep,
constant growth mindset makes such a difference. So Chris, you brought so much value to the table today. Thank you so much for joining us.
my
It's
pleasure.
been a thrill to have you. And for all our listeners or viewers out there, if you want to learn more about Chris, make sure to follow up and check her out. It sounds like I don't know a law firm that couldn't benefit from checking out this particular approach to up level both your sales, your intake process, and the experience for your clients. So definitely check out Chris's website at intakeacademy.com, or check her out on LinkedIn at Chris Mullins Phone Sales Doctor, as she indicated. And I'll make sure to include those in our show notes as well, so that you guys can find the easiest way possible to be able to track Chris down and get the benefit of her wisdom on this issue. So I am sure you've got loads of value from this episode. And if so, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already done so, for Practicing with Purpose for Lawyers Only podcast here. And make sure to share this podcast with anyone that you think could get value from this message. So whether it's this episode, and most certainly the podcast generally, the idea is for us to all be able to find that better way to practice law. And make sure to check out my Art of Feminine Negotiation podcast as well, if you're looking to up-level those negotiation skills in a way that's maybe a little different than the competitive model we've been taught through the practice of law. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and find ways that you can practice on purpose. Find a better way to practice law so you can rekindle your passion and make a difference in the world, because that's why we all started on this journey. So negotiate your best life on your terms. Until next time, take care.